So it's getting that time of year, the time of year when the fish are going to start moving up and they're going to start spawning, and there's going to be fish on the bank on beds that are willing to bite, and it's going to be able to bite that you're going to be able to go get on and have a ton of fun. Now, some of you guys are bed fishermen and some of you are not. Either way, I don't care. You make the choice of whether you want to or you don't, or if you can or you cannot, because there's some places in the country and outside of this country, like up in Canada, where you can't fish for bed fish, so look out for that. But for the guys that choose to, I want to go over some things that I look for that determine whether fish are going to be on beds or they're not going to be on beds. And so today I'm going to give you 3 key things to look for. And the last one is kind of funny. It's something that not a lot of people, if anybody I've ever heard talk about, but it's something that for me, that year after year has determined whether the fish are on the beds or not, and whether I need to be up shallow looking for them or not. And then I'll give you a tip on how to fix the problem that it creates when this happens. So we'll get to that. All right, so tip number 1 is going to be looking at the water temperature. That's your biggest, most obvious key that fish are going to be on beds. So anywhere from 55 to 65 degrees is really where those fish are going to make that big push towards the bank and when they're going to start spawning. Water temperature is determining pretty much everything that the fish does in the spawning cycle, because fish, even in the scientific arena and when they're being studied inside, these fish can be show different sorts of light, different sorts of moonlight, different lengths of light, different lengths of moonlight. And the one thing that always determines whether those fish spawn or not is water temperature. When that water hits 60 degrees, those fish start to move up. They start to make those beds and they start to make those babies. And so be looking at water temperature. Like I said, anywhere from 55 to 65. The reason I say that is because like your smallmouth and your spots, they'll want to spawn just a little bit earlier. They'll will get on beds like at 55 and even a little bit before that. And they'll spawn all the way through the spawning cycle with the largemouth, where the largemouth, for the most part in my experience, they really like that 60 degree range and just a little bit warmer. And that's when I've seen the biggest massive fish move up on the beds and want to start to spawn and then actively eat on those beds. Not actively eat, but kind of trick those fish into eating because they think something's on their bed trying to eat their babies. The second thing is going to be the moon phase. Now, I know I just said even in the lab environment where fish are shown different lengths a day and different moon cycles and all that kind of things, that the water temperature really determines it. I have seen and experienced so many times more than not that when the moon phase goes full, when the water temperatures hit the key ranges, that's when you really have that first big wave of fish move up. I don't really know why that is. It may just be the fact that those fish can see at night like they do during the day. And so it makes them want to be a little bit more active and move up. But regardless, when we hit that first full moon, like in that March to April time frame here in my area of the country, may be different where you're at, like down in Florida, it's like February. But when it hits that kind of temp range, as well as time frame range, as well as moon phase, I will see personally a bunch of fish move up. And I've actually got a little bit of a story behind that. Me and my buddy, Mr. Benjamin Nowak from Ben Nowak Fishing, you guys may know him, may not. We were actually up on the Great Lakes. It was late in May and the water hit 57 and it was a full moon. And from one day to the next, it went from like a few spawners up on the bank to literally hundreds and hundreds of spawners up on the bank. And we were actively watching them swim out of deep water and start making beds. And so the moon phase really was the key there, because the water temperature wasn't exactly perfect, but something about that moon phase and what that moon did made those fish want to move up where they didn't before it became a full moon. So just food for thought, keep it in the toolbox. The last one is the funny one, and this is like something that I've noticed year after year, and like literally every time this happens, I can go to the bank and I can look for spawning fish. And that is when the trees start to bloom and when there is pollen laying thick on the water. That day that you get out there, you're sneezing, you're wiping your nose, you're using the nose spray, you're all stopped up because of the pollen, and that pollen's laying thick on the water. Those are the days that the fish are on the beds. And I think it's just the simple fact that it's like, hey, that means spring is here. That means the water temperatures are warming up, the fish are getting more active, and I think the rebirth of the trees is when the birth of fish start happening. And so it's a funny kind of deal, because so many times I've gone to the lake and been like, man, pollen's laying on the lake, we better go up shallow, we go looking for some spawners, and there are spawners on the bank, and I'm able to go and fish for them. Now, the thing about pollen being on the water is sometimes they can get so thick that it's actually hard to see those fish. And one thing that we do in that scenario is you put just a little bit of Dawn dishwashing liquid in a bunch of water, like just a tiny drop, and you put it in like a spray bottle. And when you spray the water, that Dawn dishwashing liquid actually makes the pollen go away from itself, and it makes holes in the water and holes in the pollen where you can actually fish for those bad fish. Something weird, I know. It's a little East Tennessee trick. Go try it out. It's totally non-toxic. You don't have to worry about that. I mean, they wash baby ducks in it, so it's all good. But if you want to see me catching some spawning fish in action, click this video right here.